Good morning.
Good morning, Carolyn.
Can't believe we figured this out. Now I lost my questions. Ah! I found them. That was fun. How are you?
Good.
You are calm, serene, and sedate, and I'm about to fly off the roof here. So anyway, I hope you had a great weekend.
I did.
Excellent. Well, it rained here all weekend, and we actually like that because that never happens. So my garden's really happy. Okie dokie. Here we go. I have a really good question for you, number one. You ready?
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
So, Dr. Rosensweet, can you please tell us when menopause ends?
Never. And you know, it is really an important question.
Trust me, don't.
There's what's so important about it is there's so much misconception around this. But let me give you the overview. And with the misconception, all kinds of mistakes are made.
Yeah.
Like from my perspective, horrendous mistakes.
Yeah.
Life-changing, life-diminishing mistakes are made because of that very question, Carolyn. And here's what it actually looks like. A woman's peak hormone levels are when she's 20, plus or minus a year or two. And they start declining. Let me see if I can work this. They start declining. And they never stop declining. So if I go all the way to when she's 90, they're near zero or zero.
Right.
Now there's this of I'm trying to work backwards on the screen. Sorry. I'm trying to figure this out. Now there's this magic moment in the decline, let's say 30s, 40s, 50s, where there's a big decline. The ovaries stop producing the hormones. But that's not the end of it. You still get some production coming out of the adrenals and conversions and stuff. But there is that dramatic time when the ovaries, they just stop doing it. That means a woman all but loses most or all of her estrogens, her progesterone, a little bit of progesterone coming out of the adrenals, but just minuscule compared, and her testosterone and her DHA.
Sort of like throwing Tic Tacs to a whale. Really?
Yeah. And so, but here's an unusual thing. With these declines, once the declines get significant, there's a significant number of women that they never stop having symptoms. They have hot flashes and night sweats and sleep disturbance and cognitive decline into their 80s. So they're always aware that there's trouble in River City.
River City?
Yeah. I don't even know where that is.
Well, there's Sweet Point, Tennessee, and that's my line.
Oh,
I don't know where that is either. Let me say this. I
still want to complete this if I can just keep going here.
Okay.
There's a lot of women that they're 25% of the women who go into menopause, they don't have any symptoms at all. And they're looking around, they're going, what's the big deal? The women who have the symptoms, from my vantage point, I think they're the lucky ones, because a large majority of them will get motivated to do something about it because the symptoms are so sorry. The symptoms are so raucous and so disturbing that these 75% of them, a certain percentage of them, they'll be motivated to get this fixed if they can. And then there's a certain high percentage of women that they get symptomatic for a year or two or three or four or five. Then they stop getting symptomatic. And they still have got this just dramatic decline in hormones, but they've stopped getting symptomatic and they think that, oh, I went through menopause.
Right.
They're the ones I'm also very concerned about, because all of these women, every single one of them, those who have no symptoms, those who have raucous symptoms forever, and those who go through the symptom period to where they're not having symptoms anymore. All three of these types, they all develop the long-term, short-term, really awful biologic declines of menopause. Almost every single one of them is going to get bone loss. Almost every single one of them is going to get sarcopenia, muscle loss. Ooh, that's the big one, because they can no longer hold up the bladder and the uterus. And when you couple that with the vaginal atrophy that occurs in all the women, they get lost bladder control and they get into adult diapers. And even more significant with the sarcopenia, they get to where they cannot walk and stand with stability. So they start using canes. Then they'll go to a walker. And then from a walker, they'll go to a wheelchair. And between the adult diapers, the Depends, and the wheelchair, that's where women who can afford it or have government support, they go into assisted living facilities. They leave their home. And because I'm a medical doctor, and because I see women of all ages, including family members, I can tell you this is why you want to treat menopause. Oh, you do not, because you're not going to like it. Because like you've pointed out, and I've said many times, your life is going to matter as much to you when you're in your 80s and your 90s as it does right now. Absolutely. And yes, you're strong. Yes, you'll adjust to the canes, the walkers, and even the assisted living, but you're not going to like it. How do I know that? Because I dealt with women who've had to go into assisted living facilities and leave their home and leave their families. And this is why we do this work. This is what
I know, and so passionately so.
And you don't know what you don't know. So when you're in your 50s and you're having cognitive issues or lost libido or lost energy, you can't sleep, of course you want to get those dealt with. And of course that's very rewarding for working with women in menopause, is to alleviate those symptoms. But I promise you, what also matters more than you can even imagine, because it's not happening to you, is what's going to happen to the vast majority of you if you do not replenish these hormones. And why are nursing homes so phenomenally prevalent in the United States and other parts of the world? Assisted living facilities, these are big businesses. This is where Medicare is just losing all of its money. And what could happen if, just to you personally, if you had the foresight to replenish these hormones, you're not through menopause. There is no such thing. That's why I started this off by saying, when does menopause end? Never. When's a woman through menopause? Never. You start those hormonal declines and they're not coming back. And if you do not do something about it, you too can lose your muscles, your bones, your thinking, your arteries. Your arteries. Women are protected on hormones. They don't get the rate of arteriosclerosis and heart attacks if you have the protection. If you lose the protection, your rate of heart attack is equal to men by the age of 60. So menopause begins and it never ends. And right. It's a real misnomer. I'd like to tell women at their 20s, your hormones are about to decline. You're not going to notice it until your 30s. But when you start getting hints of it in your 30s, those hormonal declines, pick it up right then and there. Get educated about menopause. It is the most significant preventive thing you can possibly do for yourself. And men, of course, have our equivalent.
So much want to take
my hormones.
Right. And I want to take a megaphone and just put that out there on blast so that everyone will hear it. There's a question that just came up.
Sure.
Statement saying, I'm menopausal since 2008, have not ever been on any ERT. I feel like I've aged 10 years into ERT. I'm not sure what estrogen
replacement.
Yeah. So and along with what you're saying, we do feel like we've aged not 10, but like 100 years, or I did.
Any menopause treating doctor can walk through a crowd or look at women who are above the age of 50 and say for certain who's on hormones and who's not.
I
that
can't.
aging, yes, and any woman who wants to just identify the women who are on hormones, walk through your town, and the women who are not. And it's not so. Yes, exactly what the Facebook user says.
You know what? It's so important. It is so important. It is so important. And we've been doing these interviews a long time. And if there is one thing that can be said, it is that. And thank you, Dr. Rosensweet, because you are so right. OMG, right. And I'm sorry, River City person. All the women in River City need to be on hormones, as far as I'm concerned. For sure. Okie dokie. So, men, yeah, I have a neighbor. She's in her 70s, and she said, "Oh, I remember going through that. Boy, I'm glad I got through that all right." And I just kept my mouth shut. I was going to open Pandora's box, and her husband,
yeah, right.
How am I going to tell this woman, get yourself, over to Dr. Rosensweet for damn sake now? Anyway, it makes me really sad, kind of, in a way.
Well, this is the great work you're doing. This is what Carolyn Shapiro's Dharma has unfolded for her.
Brick by brick for 6 years. Boy, that was a lonely night way back in 2015, I will tell you. But the gods that be shined, whatever, kindly on me. Because they sent me to you, and you are amazing. Okay, we're going to question number 2. I hope every woman just heard every single solitary word that Dr. Rosensweet just said. If you didn't, replay it like 10 times. Please, begging, begging, begging. When we bind up our hormones, as we do, which is to me an enigma still, where do they go? And do they go to our brain? And how do we get them to cooperate and get unbound so that we can use them?
Well, let me see if I can straighten out that image you have about bound and unbound and stuff. The hormones, almost every hormone you can name, is not water soluble. Which means is if you put a drop of estrogen in a glass of water, it would behave like olive oil does in a glass of water. It'll float. It's lighter than water. And yet here you go, your ovaries, for example, are producing these non-water soluble chemicals, biochemicals called hormones. They cannot dump a fat soluble particle into the bloodstream and have it travel around the body as little fat globules. It wouldn't work. In fact, we don't like fat globules floating around in the blood, which is primarily water. Well, the body, nature, the creator, however you want to look at it, has a fantastic design. This is amazing design. When the ovaries let go of these hormones into the bloodstream, that's what happens, they are picked up by carrier pigeons. Well, they're not actually pigeons, but they are carriers.
I think they're elephants, if I'm not mistaken.
They are carriers. And these carriers pick up the hormones as they're excreted into the bloodstream by the ovaries and carry them around to where they need to be in the body, which is just about everywhere. You think they need to be in your uterus to menstruate and stuff. Yeah, they need to be in your breast to be able to prepare you for lactation. Yeah, but they need to be in your brain for you to think. They need to be in your bones for your bones to be okay. They need to be in your arteries for your arteries to be okay. And they are carried around to all of these organs. And they're picked up by these carriers. Here's another way to say it. these carriers are proteins, and they're bound to these proteins. Picked up, bound. When you think of binding, they're just connected up to, they're connected. It's about connection again. It's about intimacy and connection again on an ultramolecular level. Intimacy and connection. The ovary lets go of these hormones into the bloodstream, and by intimacy and connection with these plasma proteins, they're carried around the whole bloodstream and they're distributed everywhere. And when they arrive at their destination, they're unbound.
Okay.
They're bound to the carrier proteins just to be transported. And when they reach the cells that they need to go to, they let go of them. Oh my God, how in the world does that happen? I mean, who designed this whole deal here? Please tell. Pray tell.
Pray tell. Please tell. I don't know. I'm going to have a conversation with that person later sometime.
That person? You know them? You know who they are? You've identified them?
We talk on a daily basis.
Oh, interesting.
You know that.
Okay. And so binding is a dynamic situation. They're bound up when they leave the ovary as they need to be. They're carried to where they need to be, and then they're unbound. And there's a lot of these proteins. There's not just one of them. One of them, one prominent one, is called sex hormone binding globulin, and that's what your concern is: binding, binding, binding. No, it's a very dynamic process. They're just, so I want to give you a different image, that they're linked up to these carrier proteins, or bound, linked up temporarily. They're distributed, and then they're unlinked or unbound.
Is it protective?
Pardon?
Is it a protective device going on there?
Well, it's all about solubility.
Okay.
Like, fats don't travel around in water, and blood is the highest percentage of water. That's the only solvent that blood is it's water. So you can't just put a fat, like, here's IVs. There's such a thing as giving a lot of things by IV, but you can't give fats by IV. For example, CoQ10 is a fat, coenzyme Q10. You can't just inject CoQ10 into someone's bloodstream, because it's a fat. It's going to be a globule. It's not okay to do that. There's risks involved in putting fats. In fact, there's this illness in medicine called fat embolus, where somehow someone's fat gets disrupted and gets into their blood and causes a lot of problems. Fat does not travel in water.
Right.
But the designer of it all, the creator of all of this, came up with a workaround. Just like all of you are going to have some workarounds today, probably.
Yeah.
And so there's these proteins that link up to these fatty particles, fatty molecules, carry them where they need to go, and distribute them and pop them into the cells. They arrive at the cell membrane. They enter into the cell. Oh my God, they're cut free by that point. They're unlinked from the proteins that bind them, and they go into the cell. And oh my God, then they go into the cell nucleus. Oh my God, then they start talking to the DNA. Oh my God, and the DNA has a response to this communication.
It's amazing.
It's staggering.
It is. It's amazing.
So it's a good question, but I hope I've changed the whole image.
Well, I think that many of us get frightened. Like if we hear that, we have high sex hormone binding globulin, or you get into the thyroid binding globulins and T4s and T3s and reverse T3s and all that.
Well, let me address that, Carolyn.
Thank you very much.
Those are good questions.
Well, they're thoughts. I mean, it's scary, kind of, for us.
Sex hormone binding globulin. That's one of the proteins, a rather principal protein that carries estrogens and testosterone and progesterone, carries it around the body, and then deposit it at the feet of the cells, so to speak.
The feet.
And let's say that you've got a young woman who's 20 years old, and she's at the peak of her estrogen production, and you give her extra estrogen. Well, human beings do not like extra anything, especially extra potent hormones.
Which are very potent. Yeah.
Very potent. And so, as a protection mechanism, these young women who are given extra estrogen, well, how are they given extra estrogen? Well, they're taking the birth control pills. There's estrogen in those birth control pills. There's estradiol in there. So here you got a young woman at the peak of her estrogen production, and you give her some extra estrogen, and her body goes, extra estrogen alert. Well, we can use a normal protective mechanism against excessive estrogen. We're already binding up estrogen to transport it. We'll just produce some extra sex hormone binding globulin, and thus the woman taking the birth control pill will not have extra estrogen floating around in her body. We'll keep it normal. We'll keep it within the reference range that we like. Oh, problem, that extra sex hormone binding globulin, yes, it will protect against the excessive estradiol, but it'll also bind up testosterone. So a lot of young women on the birth control pill lose their libido. So these things not only act as a normal day-to-day operations, sex hormone binding globulin, thyroid binding globulin, cortisol binding globulin, these things are fat soluble. They got to be transported. But they'll also act as a protective mechanism. So you start giving women excessive levels of hormones, and the body's going to protect them from those excessive levels of these very potent chemicals called hormones. It's going to increase sex hormone binding globulin. So this is not a disease, but it's a hassle.
Right. So, like, let's say hypothetically, I put on, 2 drops instead of 1. I don't have to go freak out, right? Like,
absolutely not.
Okay, because I get that a lot. Like, my bottle, 2 drops. I mean, I like really.
And this is a great thing that you're talking about right now, because I run into this frequently.
I do too. Yeah.
The ranges that someone who really knows what they're doing are not going to give you drops that 1 extra drop is going to make a difference, big difference. In fact, when you're young and your brain and your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland and your ovaries are in this symphonic harmony that is just unreal. All of it's regulated exquisitely. Oh my God, it's orchestrated amazingly. And if you need a little extra estrogen one day because you got a little extra stress, or you need a little extra testosterone, your brain tells your hypothalamus, tells your pituitary, and you get a little extra stimulating hormone, because your day-to-day hormonal needs change. And they fluctuate according to nature and that just extraordinary menstrual cycle, but they also fluctuated according to stress requirements.
Right.
When we're treating a woman in menopause, all of a sudden, it's not your brain and hypothalamus that's controlling the levels. You're applying the levels to your skin for absorption. And do we get that 100% exact? No, we don't get it 1,000,000% exact. And the good news is we don't need to. But to be in fantasy that your hormone needs are exact, 1 drop, 2 drops a day, it's fantasy. We can't meet the exquisite regulating power of your internal body, and we don't have to. So if you put on an extra drop, what I tell myself, if I put on an extra drop of testosterone, I tell myself a story, and the story is I must have needed that. It's a total story.
I love that
I
story.
must have been low, lower than I thought.
Right.
You don't have to worry about the exactness. And when you're doing the menopause method and you're using the organic oils and we're dispensing drops, we've got it all designed. So if you do an extra drop, no big deal. And it's not so much when you're in menopause what you're doing daily or twice a day. It's how much are you getting in a month, for example. Are you getting the right amount in a month or a year? So that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to get your hormone levels up into reasonableness. And so don't worry about that extra drop.
Okay, good.
Don't worry about missing a day because you forgot.
Yeah, I get that a lot. And I did it myself. I was really scared at the beginning. Okay,
and let me say a little more, Carolyn.
Okay.
If you do an extra drop and all of a sudden you get breast tenderness, what you learned about yourself, if you do an extra drop of biased, is that as far as your body goes, you're riding high. You've replenished your estrogen levels so substantially that one extra drop gave you breast tenderness. Come on, your general body levels must be pretty high. Well, that's cool. So you just reduce it a little. Or if you miss a day or you miss a dose and you get a hot flash, you're riding low in there. Your general body levels of estrogen are quite low. All you got to do is miss a day or miss an application and you get symptomatic. Your general body levels are low. So you probably want to increase them.
Okay, so you know what? I'm sorry to revisit this, but I have a question myself. If you're low, you get that hot flash, you put a little bit, wouldn't your body maybe bind that up?
Well, if you miss a dose and you get a hot flash, we've just done a scientific, pragmatic, quote, laboratory, end quote, test. We learned about you that your general body levels were so low that all you had to do was miss one dose and you got a hot flash. You're riding low. You want to have more resilience than that. You want to have more storage depot stuff than that. And these hormones are fat soluble, so they are going to store like a bank in the adipose tissue of your body. So you've learned that you probably want to increase your dosages because you shouldn't be that delicate.
Right.
You should have a decency that you've got more of a strategic reserve there if you miss a dose. If you miss a dose or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, you shouldn't get symptoms.
Right.
Enough in your fatty tissue of your body that your fat's going to go, hey, this is our bank account. Let's give her a little savings here. We've got a storehouse of estrogen in the fat, so we'll release a little bit because she forgot her dose today. But no worries, we got a strategic reserve here called her adipose tissue or fatty tissue.
Got it. I love that strategic reserve. Okay, that's a good one. I like that. I'm gonna put that on my mirror. I have a strategic reserve, and that's true. I mean, that makes good sense. It does.
So it's a practical way to know, are you in a decent treatment zone? And we capitalize on this. And you and I have talked about this on a couple of occasions. We ask women to stop taking hormones once a month. Just for ease of memory, just stop on the first day of the month, or stop on the full moon if you're tuned into the moon or the new moon. Stop taking your hormones. And if you miss your morning dose, like you're supposed to do on that first of the month or first of the moon, and you get a hot flash, you learn something about yourself. You're not running excessive levels of hormones. You're running thin. You're running on thin ice there. So in general, you'd want to increase your dose. Or if you stop your hormones, and you used to get hot flashes back in the day, and on day 1, you get no hot flashes, and on day 2 and day 3 and day 4 and day 5, you get no hot flashes. You're running rich.
You got a good strategic reserve.
Yeah, and if it takes you a week to get a symptom, ooh-wee, you're probably running a little too rich.
Yeah.
the way we like to see it happen is you stop your hormones, and within 3 days, plus or minus, you get a symptom. And so I won't go into that particular reason we do that. But what's the idea? There's a range of benefit and goodness. We want you in the range, and with a little bit of luxury and a little bit of not too much and not too little. Now we can help define that when we do the 24-hour urine hormone test. But there's a lot of clinical ways or a lot of practical ways that you yourself can know whether you're running lean or running rich.
This is like, geez Louise, advanced menopause.
Yes, it is. This is Menopause 303.
It
But
is.
hey, listen, you got 10, 20, 30, 40 years to be an absolute expert at this. And when you're in the menopause method, we help you become an expert in your own body. So you learn all these things. And the good news is so much is known that we can do such a great job because so much is known. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by it. I don't want anyone to be overwhelmed by it. But it's something that here's your job. It's always the same job. It's always the same job. You're going into menopause, find someone who really knows what they're doing. It's like your dentist. I could do my own dentistry.
Ugh.
Yeah, right. I could do my own dentistry. God help my teeth in my mouth if I was doing my own dentistry. No, I love the expertise of the dentist. I just lean back and there they go, Well, menopause is not dentistry, but you want someone who's that good.
You do.
And then you just go and do it as a team because you will be involved in the process and you get it right. And then you're set for your whole life. And you go to your menopause specialist once a year, once you get it set, and you keep retesting and tweaking, just like I go to my dentist. I go 3 times a year. But menopause.
I went to mine yesterday.
Cool.
And I can tell you, boy, I appreciate him because I'm not going to do my own teeth. You can best bet on that. I'm not going to take out my own appendix either.
Really?
I swear. Well, it's gone anyway, but I wouldn't do it. Maybe yours I do, but not mine. Okie dokie. So now, thank you for that too. God, I mean, we can just talk about this or I can forever and a day. Back to xenoestrogens. Now, we know, because we've talked about this, to do the house cleaning and get rid of all of the ickies and stuff that, we bring in, and we have the nutrient drain, and, we have to eat healthfully and so on and so forth. However, the question came in, how does one do a good hormone detox, period? And how do we know, like, if we're getting rid of toxins, if we've gotten rid of toxins in our home, we've done all that, how do we know if we've detoxed and have done an adequate hormone clearance? Is it then that we start up hormones?
Well, let me look at this from the 30,000 feet. The word toxicity, human beings had to be concerned about a lot of problems 200 years ago, but they didn't have to be concerned about that much toxicity.
Right.
Because there wasn't these huge chemical issues and really it's about the dinosaurs. We decided to revive the dinosaurs in the form of oil. And we brought that oil to the surface and we started making plastics out of it and, oh God, everything, so many things out of oil. And these things are toxic chemicals. And anyone who has done any bit of study into what kind of exposures you as an individual have, oh my God, it's staggering. And it's not like arsenic. Back in the day, you drop a few powders of arsenic in someone's drink and arsenic is toxic and that's it. They
Asta.
Vista. It's not like arsenic.
Right.
There's just this ton of toxic molecules that they're toxic, all right. They give you trouble, but they don't do it all in one fell swoop. And they add up. And so what seems like just normal daily operating procedure and navigating on the planet Earth, there's a lot of things that aren't normal about it. There are chemicals that you are exposed to that are injurious to your body. And it's not like arsenic, so you get one of these chemicals and you keel over, but they're injurious and they add up, and the exposures are huge. And they're all over the place. Perfume. Oh, isn't that cool? No, it's not a healthy chemical for you. And all these household cleaner things, read the labels. What is all that mystical chemistry, words you can't pronounce? Those are not healthy molecules.
They're this long.
Yeah. And they're all over the place. And the stuff that's really troublesome is the stuff that's coming in the food supply and the air and the water. Woo!
Right.
And it's we are so polluted.
I know.
Oh my God. And it's, agribusiness is a big problem. And they decided that they wanted to increase crop yields, and they dumped a bunch of nitrogen in the soils after World War II, and the plants did grow faster. That nitrogen, they sucked that up and they grew faster. But plants need a heck of a lot more than nitrogen. They need minerals. They need all kinds of things. And those plants that grew faster were not healthy.
And we ate them.
Well, it's not even that so much. It's that when you put in a crop and it's not healthy, these things are more vulnerable to weeds and to insects.
We don't eat those.
Vulnerable. So when they did these big agribusiness funky farming practices where they make these huge fields of corn or whatever, wheat, whatever, that's not good agriculture. And you make these crops very vulnerable to insects and weeds. So what did they do?
Roundup.
Their remedy was, well, let's kill the weeds and let's kill the insects. Picture a few insects crawling around on your desk right now and think of what things you would have to pour on them to kill them. Fairy dust isn't going to do it. Water isn't going to do it unless you drown them. You got to use some heavy duty chemicals. And if you've ever sprayed an insecticide or a mosquito repellent or an herbicide, these wonderful things, have a healthy lawn, have your front yard look like a golf course. Yeah, you should smell those chemicals, and you wouldn't dare taste it, and you wouldn't stick it in your eye to see if it burned. Oh, that's one of the methods that they use to test chemicals. They stick it in a rabbit's eye.
No,
if a rabbit's eye burns. These are extremely gross. And, I'm getting a little graphic because this stuff is poisonous and we get exposed to a tremendous amount of it. And it's coming through the air and the water and the food. And that's the biggest sources of it, but it's also coming in all these household chemicals that you're using to clean your bathroom. Oh my God, you ever smell that stuff, Ed, on? That stuff is strong. Or clean your dishes or put in your dryer, all this stuff, it's all over the place.
And you have hairspray, perfume. I know, I'm going to make you crazy, right?
Or you walk into a mall, and there's some people who are environmentally sensitive. They cannot walk in a mall. They're going to feel sick because the air in the mall is full of dry cleaning fluid from the clothing stores and all kinds of chemicals. I'm hoping I'm painting a grisly, disgusting picture.
You have painted a very grisly, disgusting picture. Very much.
You.
Yeah.
And because I'm a holistic medical doctor, I've been one for 50 years. And what do I know? When someone comes in and they're not well, we got to do some basics. We need to clean up their nutrition. We need to get them to exercise. We need to give them tools to deal with stress. So there's an elephant in the room. I'm not going to go down that pathway. And we need to detoxify them. And some people have got so much toxic that their energy's down, their immune systems are down. And so we detoxify them. How do we detoxify them? The very first thing we do is we tell them, remove the poison from your house, your lawn, your car. Get rid of this stuff. And it makes it much cheaper because my favorite cleaning thing is distilled vinegar in water. And I spray it all over the bathroom. I clean the bathrooms with it. I clean my kitchen with it.
And I just bought a whole big thing. It cost $1.29. Almost broke me, but I bought it.
Sad to hear that. Your income must have really took a
dive.
And then what else do you need? Well, if you want a scrubber, you could use baking soda. It's a little scrubby there. And then what else do you need? And I'm very careful about our laundry detergent. It's one of these brands that they're paying a lot of attention to small amounts and not a lot of chemicals. There's eco-friendly stuff all over the place. And then tell me what else you need. You don't need all these exotic things that you buy. And I'm very careful about dry cleaning and where I send these things in. I want someone who's not using these chemicals. So the first thing you do as it relates to toxic chemicals is you scour your environment and you just get rid of them and you reduce your exposure. And it's a big topic, and you can get a lot of information on the internet on how to clean up your environment. Your food supply.
Yeah.
Well, there's a simple remedy. You just buy organic.
Hang on. The magical cleaner is for $1.29 is white distilled vinegar, and I was making a joke, but it was $1.29. Anyway, go ahead.
Clear distilled vinegar, right? Yeah. They call it white, but it's actually clear.
Yes.
Now you can solve the pesticides and herbicides that are coming in through the food supply. Ooh, that's a big one. By purchasing organic, and don't purchase others.
No refined, processed, yucky.
Well, that's a whole other thing related to nutrition, but we're talking about toxins now. You purchase organic. You purchase,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you get a garden and you buy at farmers markets as best as you can. So it's a whole work of art to clean up what you're putting into your body. And I haven't even mentioned the water and the air, but it's imperative that you do so. That's step number one. Detoxification. People who really have health issues, that's one of the things we do. We teach them how to do liver cleanses. And this is not something I'm going to go into today. We teach them how to sweat. Like, sweat can get rid of a lot of stuff. And as a esteemed colleague and brilliant ex-pathologist and holistic doc said, buy one of those radiant heaters. I've got one right down here. And stick it in your bathroom or in a closet. It'll heat it up to 104 degrees. A lot of these hydrocarbons, they come out at 104 degrees. So you get in your closet and you sweat.
How about taking a ballet class?
Another excellent exercise. You sweat during your exercise. You're doing great stuff. So you can learn a lot about detoxification talking to naturopathic physicians and the naturopathic knowledge base. And there's a lot of chiropractors and nutritionists who know this really well. There's a lot of health coaches out there that are studying diligently many things about getting healthy. In fact, I know one right now. She's on my screen right now. Her name is Carolyn Shapiro. And this is the kind of stuff you learn. You'll learn how to clean up your environment. And hydrogen peroxide's cool too. It's a good one.
You know, I live with a man I have for 20 years who could work for Scotland Yard with his nose. And so we can't have any of that stuff in here.
Beautiful.
He goes cuckoo.
It's beautiful.
I didn't notice, but through him I have.
Right. He's right. And so
absolutely right.
Now, a woman in menopause, so many women are going to do just great.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have to think, I have to detoxify to receive hormones. No way.
Right.
You're not.
Right.
And rarely we run into, and I'm finally getting around to the word you started off with, which is xenoestrogens. Far be it from me to ramble.
Far be it for you to.
So what are the xenoestrogens? Well, biochemically and in the human body, how does some of these dinosaur products actually, what do they do inside the human body? Oh my God. They act like fake estrogens. They bind to estrogen receptor sites. Oh my God. How could a dinosaur or petroleum products that came from dinosaurs, how are they going to behave in the human body? Of all things that they could possibly do, they bind to hormone receptor sites.
They're little mimickers.
And this is such a big deal that, as I mentioned on here before, is they discovered that Florida alligators were not reproducing like they used to. And they investigated and they found out that their sperm counts were way down. And one of the reasons their sperm counts are way down are from the birth control pills that are floating in the city water supplies and in the water, and they're getting into the rivers. And another thing is their hormone receptor sites are getting occupied by dinosaurs. Well, they're not actual dinosaurs. They're the petroleum byproducts of these dinosaurs that went to sleep under the earth a long time ago.
Yeah.
So occasionally we'll run into a woman in menopause and we're getting not usually predictable responses from the hormones. In fact, sometimes we're getting paradoxical responses. We expect one thing and we get something the opposite of it. And when that kind of stuff is going on, rather than spending a lot of money on testing you to see if your body actually has a bunch of this stuff in there, and that can be done, there are laboratories in the United States that we can send them a sample of blood and urine, and they can tell us which one of these herbicides and pesticides and xenoestrogens are actually in your body. And you can spend quite a bit of money to do that. But the easy way to do it, and it's part of health and healing anyway, is you do a detoxification regimen that includes a liver cleanse. You clean up your environment, you clean up your food supply, and you might even buy yourself a $350 dry infrared sauna in your house. I own one of those. And you climb in them from time to time, and you know what happens when you turn them on? You sweat. Or stick a radiant heater in a closet or in a bathroom. It'll heat up to, if you can get it as high as 104 degrees, you're going to do some sweating. That is a wonderful temperature to volatilize a lot of this hydrocarbons that are part of what we're exposed to. That's what xenoestrogens are. They're these hydrocarbons that you took in through what you ate and what you drank and what you sprayed around your house and what you stuck in your dryer and the air freshener fragrance you stuck in your car and all this garbage that you don't need any of it. And that's the infrared sauna. That's what you can get a simple infrared sauna. And someone said 140 degrees. No, it's 104 degrees. The hydrocarbons volatilize at a very low temperature, enough to make you sweat. 104 degrees. Hey, you've been in a 104 degree closet lately? It's not 140 degrees. It's 104 degrees, as one of our questioners said in the chat.
Come move to LA. You'll be in 104 degrees.
You just sweat. That's the thing. You get yourself to sweat. It does so much good. And yes, there is advantages to infrared saunas. And but the bottom line is, if you're having these unusual responses to hormones, one of the things we think about is, are your receptor sites sort of bunged up by xenoestrogens, and how do we get rid of them? We heat you up. We heat you up and you sweat. And a lot of this stuff will leave your body. And these aren't things that happen overnight. You do a detoxification program over a year or two.
Thank you, Dr. Rosensweet. Again, back to menopause 404. It's not even 303 at this point. Someone had come up, I believe it's a husband of someone, I can't see it now, but he said that a woman, his wife, Joan, not taking hormones is like listening to like really bad music or something like that. It was a great, great, great little post there, and boy, I can relate to that totally. I'm not gonna, because we only have a couple of minutes left, I'm not gonna get into this next question. Back to, though, what we were talking about in regards to bound up hormones. Somebody posted, my SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, is high and my physician is concerned. So just to revisit that for a second, the operative word there is concerned.
It's not a disease.
Right.
It's part of a natural protection mechanism.
Yes.
But it makes regulating hormones challenging.
Yes.
And a little bit of an elevation, very often it's not a big deal. But you can get some significant elevations, and it gets tricky, because if the sex hormone binding globulin is elevated and you give more hormones, sometimes you'd elevate it more, and you're just doing this kind of thing.
Right.
So sooner or later, we need to deal with sex hormone binding globulin.
Got it. Thank you.
One of the things that lowers sex hormone binding globulin is testosterone. So someone who's low in testosterone, as is 100% of the men and the women,
that's a small
not 99. Okay, there's a few of you that when you're in the perimenopause and early menopause, few of you women have adequate or even slightly elevated testosterone and androgens. But by 3 years from your last period, there isn't zero of you who've got adequate androgens. So one of the things we'd love to do is replenish that testosterone and the DHEA and see if that'll help the sex hormone binding globulin. There's a few things like boron has been mentioned, and magnesium has been mentioned, and some herbs have been mentioned. I haven't been successful. When I've got a stubborn sex hormone binding globulin that's interfering with the treatment of a woman, we'll use a pharmaceutical drug called danazol. Caution, anyone who's taking danazol, it works. It'll lower that sex hormone binding globulin. But you do have to do some blood tests periodically. There's some rare, but they happen, complications using danazol when it interferes with the white blood cell count. So
you want to get with someone who
you want to get with someone who knows what they're doing when they're using danazol. And one of the things they got to be doing is they got to be checking your blood every 6 months or something, depending on what it looks like. And you got to be using lowish danazol doses. And the doses we use for lowering the sex hormone binding globulin are extremely low. Like women who are in endometriosis, we're using very substantial doses of danazol. And you're using about a 10th or a 20th of that dose when we're playing with sex hormone binding globulin lowering in a woman or a man. But this is technical stuff that you need to be working with someone who really knows what they're doing.
Right. And try not to be afraid, because when you're afraid, then that evokes the stress response, and then the it's a big, kind of like catch-22. Now you're all stressed out and your hormones are like doing whatever they're doing because of your stress, right?
Well, always that's an issue for sex hormone binding globulin and about a million other things. That's a good thing that you illuminate that.
We'll get to those other million things, right?
But sex hormone binding globulin is not something you need to worry about. I mean, we could make a case that there's things that you could worry about, but sex hormone binding globulin, at worst, it's going to interfere with your hormones. You're going to have trouble regulating them, but it's not a disease. the issue you're having is part of the normal body regulating mechanism. And I'd like to say one other thing. We 100% check every woman's sex hormone binding globulin at the beginning of beginning to treat her in menopause. And the reason we do is that we run into elevations that seem to be mysterious, but they're not. They've come from women who took the birth control pill. Their sex hormone binding globulin went up. They stopped the birth control pill. The sex hormone binding globulin should go back down to normal, but it didn't.
What? Yep.
So we're looking at these things right out of the gate with all of our patients. And not that we're anticipating a problem from it. They can have a slight elevation. We can still, it may not give us any trouble at all, but it's not a disease. And we just figure out how to get it down and get the hormones balanced. And lo and behold, the magic hour, the wishing hour has come up.
This hour, I swear to God, if this hour had gone this fast in algebra, I would have been thrilled. Oh my God, that was brutal. This hour goes so fast.
I'm going to need to sign off, and we'll
I know.
see you again Thursday morning.
Thursday morning for sure. We're happy to have all of you up here. Thank you so much for all of the great comments and the humor. Your humor, Dr. Rosensweet. You're dear caring. We love you, and you know that we do. Bashful as you are. And please, yeah, right. So please, will you send me a screenshot so I can write all these down?
All right, I'm doing it as we speak.
Cool, and we will talk really fast next time. We'll put it at 75 RPM and fly through this thing. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy, be safe, be happy. We'll talk to you on Thursday.
Thank you for my fun Tuesday and Thursday mornings hanging out with you, Carolyn Shapiro.
No, it's my fun hanging out with you, Dr. Rosensweet.
All righty.
We have fun.
Bye, everybody.
See you later, all.